Chapter 5 Miami Part 1 Part 2 After hours spent in the sun and in the ocean, James was exhausted. It was a pleasant kind though, where his skin was warm and he could still feel the ocean rolling over him. He took a nap in Peter's room, not wanting to walk all the way to his own. Plus, every 30 minutes Peter was asking him to put more aloe vera on his back, and it was easier to do if they were in the same room. They still had big plans to have a night out, and they all had a couple of drinks at the beach. He slept until it was well past dinner time, and the sun was starting to set completely. It was the second time he had been woken up against his will, but Peter was bored, and he couldn't stay asleep for very long. Nightlife in Miami was different than it had been in New York. It was more beachy, and there were bars and things on the beach, as well as lots of drinks inspired by tropical things. James wore a pair of shorts and a button up that he left open because of how warm out it still was. Mary had called Remus earlier, saying that the label wanted a new song and that they should stay in again to finish the one that James had started a couple of days ago. They lied to her when they said they would do that. They were in Miami. They had to go out and celebrate. They were known enough that getting into the club had been easy, and they brought Lily with them since she had been dying to go out. James found that he liked Lily. She was funny and very good at her job. She was beautiful too, without a doubt, with her long red hair and bright green eyes. She also did not take any bullshit, which was an awe to witness in person. If a guy at the bar tried to make a move on her or do anything she didn't like, she had it handled before any of them were even attuned to the situation. Sirius had basically disappeared, although they all knew where he was, more or less. He was likely of making out with someone he just met in a random booth. It also meant that he would be asking James to borrow his room and leave him bunking with Remus or Peter. He didn't mind that much, but it was a bit confusing sometimes, the way Sirius acted. So, when they were all ready to leave, head back to the hotel and pass out until it was time for soundcheck the next day, they had to find Sirius first. "I'll wait outside," Remus said, ducking out of the bar before anybody could respond to him. Lily followed almost immediately, leaving Peter and James to find Sirius. He was in a bathroom, the door locked, making it all the more obvious what was going on. James sighed, leaning his head against the wall and closing his eyes while he waited. The bar was still loud and very crowded. It took Peter a little while to find him, and the two of them waited in silence, passing a cigarette back and forth. When the door opened, the first person out was a tall, skinny man with sandy brown hair. He looked a bit like maybe he had seen God, and there were high keys on his neck. He nodded at James and Peter, thinking that maybe they were just waiting for the bathroom. Sirius came out next, after the other man was gone. He already had a cigarette in between his lips, and his hair was pushed back like someone had been running their hands through it. Really, he looked like he had just gotten fucked, and he probably had if the other man was anything to go off of. "In the bathroom? Really?" Peter asked, nose scrunched up a little bit. Sirius noticed them standing there then, a surprised look passing across his features to see them there before it settled back to a nonchalance. "Couldn't bring him back to my room exactly," he said, a smug look on his face. They made their way out of the bar, finding Lily and Remus leaning against the wall of the bar, watching the people walk by. Even drunk, James could tell there was some sort of tension with Sirius and Remus. They had hardly spoken since the beach, and were both trying very hard to avoid eye contact. He wasn't going to say anything in front of Lily or Peter, Not if they didn't already know. Peter talked the most on the way back, pointing out anything that he seemed to find interesting and just rambling to fill the silence. Lily joined him in it, talking nonsense that apparently only Peter could understand. James hung back was serious, having to force him to keep walking. Ever since they had stepped outside, he had been noticeably quiet and he was dragging his feet. Were they fighting? Really, whatever was going on, they needed to work it out quickly. It was hard to be in a band if the members didn't get along. It was going to translate into everything: the way they interacted on stage, the songs, the interviews. That was why James followed Sirius to his room, forgetting momentarily that he was sharing with Regulus and being surprised to see him there. He was wearing pajamas, but he wasn't asleep. All of the lights were on, and he was writing something. James couldn't tell what because he snapped it shut before he got close enough. Sirius seemed to freeze up upon seeing Regulus as well, likely forgetting just like James had. "Hello," Regulus said, sitting up straighter and breaking the silence. James couldn't very well have a conversation with Sirius with his brother right there, not if his suspicions were right, and they were fighting. "Hi," Sirius said, kicking his shoes off and heading into the bathroom to get ready for bed. James and Regulus were left alone in the room, and if James was smart, he would have left or followed Sirius. He wasn't very smart. "What's that?" he asked, gesturing to the notebook. "Nothing." James frowned. "Is it your diary?" he asked, teasing slightly. "It's not." James sat on the bed, keeping the distance but still wanting to be closer. "Fun night?" "Something like that." "Why didn't you swim today?" James asked, still pouting about it. "You could have put a plastic bag around the cast." Regulus raised his eyebrows in amusement, a tiny smile playing on his lips. He moved the notebook to the side table and stretched his legs out in front of him, getting more comfortable in the bed. James was drawn to his every movement. "I don't know how to swim." James's jaw dropped in genuine surprise. Everyone knew how to swim, at least everyone over the age of 12 or so, he had thought. "You're joking." "I'm not." James stood up, fully planning on taking Regulus to the ocean and teaching him how to swim right then. Of course, he had forgotten momentarily about Sirius and was quickly reminded when he walked out of the bathroom. The more time he spent around Regulus, the less he thought they were identical. They did look alike. They were brothers, so it only made sense. But the differences were there, and they were obvious if one was looking. Regulus had sharper features, fuller lips, darker eyes. Sirius had brighter eyes, a longer nose, longer hair. "Oh, you're still here?" Sirius asked him, stopping for a moment when he saw James before continuing his path. His original mission popped back into his head, and he wondered how well it would go over if he kicked Regulus out for a couple of minutes. James couldn't leave it alone either. He hadn't had that much to drink, not in comparison to Remus or Lily. Even Sirius hadn't had a lot, so what better time to ask him what the hell was going on? "I need to talk to you," he said. "Okay, so talk." "Oh, are you guys breaking up?" Regulus asked, clearly amused with himself. "I will throw you out the window," Sirius said to him. "Try it. Don't tempt me." "Sirius," James said, interrupting them. Really, they could go on forever if James didn't change the subject. He seemed to understand now that James wasn't joking, that something was clearly bothering him. And he kicked Regulus out, saying they just needed 10 minutes. He complained the whole way out, saying something about how he was going to stab them both in their sleep. James didn't think that was a terrible way to go. Is something going on with you and Remus? James asked, getting right into it. They didn't dance around things, just coming out and saying it no matter what. Sirius literally froze, his eyes widening slightly. What? No, why? Did he say something? He found the reaction odd. The way he was almost scared that James had picked up on something. You guys have been weird all night. Are you fighting? "I- James, I don't even know," Sirius said, falling back onto the bed. James joined him, both of them staring up at the ceiling. Did something happen? Yeah, Sirius said, exhaling a deep breath as if he was holding that one word inside of him. James didn't respond, waiting for him to elaborate. I fucked up. What happened? Sirius didn't answer him for a long time. Long enough that James thought he might have fallen asleep, had it not been for the sound of his uneven breathing. He wasn't asleep. He was apparently just working up the courage to tell James the truth. I kissed him. Who? James asked almost immediately, as if there was no way he could have been talking about Remus. Serious sigh. Mooney. I kissed Mooney. He didn't know why it was taking his brain so long to catch up. What? You mean our Mooney? Yeah. Remus? Yep. James sat up, looking at Sirius. You mean you kissed Remus Lupin? He covered his face with his hands, grounding loudly into them. I know. It was stupid, and now he hates me and I fucked everything up. Sirius kissed Remus. Okay, that was okay. Everyone had kissed Remus at some point. It was a rite of passage, really. Everyone who met him instantly fell in love. It had been James's first kiss, even. James wasn't all that surprised, not really. It was only a matter of time before they got together. This just wasn't the way he had expected it to happen. Petfoot, you didn't fuck anything up. I kissed Mooney. Yeah, you did do that. You totally are not helping. Okay, well, how did he react? Sirius was blushing now, and James got the feeling he didn't have the whole story. James? Serious? He responded, slightly amused now. He kissed me back. Oh, fuck me. It was so nice, you know. Just for a moment, it was nice. Okay, and then? I might have run out. He tried not to. He really did. But James just started laughing. What a serious thing to do. Run right out of the room after kissing someone. He didn't need to ask how he felt about Remus. He could already tell from the one sentence. Sirius really likes him. Don't laugh. You ran out of the room? He asked, still laughing. Yes, and we haven't spoken since. In the corner of his mind, James remembered what happened at the bar and who exactly had walked out of the bathroom. It hadn't been Remus. He would have noticed, but. Oh my god, did you sleep with someone just because they looked like Molly? James asked, way too loudly. He was having far too much fun with this, but it was only fair. Sirius's silence told James everything he needed to know, and he properly collapsed into giggles that time, until Sirius was laughing right along with him. It's pathetic. You could have just slept with Mooney. He isn't speaking to me. James raised an eyebrow. Well, you don't really have to do much talking if you know what I. Not now, Bronx. James smiled. Just talk to him. It's money. He shook his head. I can't. Why not? Because I can't act like I regret it, James. Oh, he was, pardon the pun, serious. He felt real things for Remus, and never mind the fact that he had failed to mention it to James. He could complain about that later. Do you want me to talk to him? James offered. No, really, he can't know that I told you. Okay? Is it that obvious? Which part? Any of it. All of it. It's obvious you guys aren't talking. It was less obvious that you are obsessed with him until you pointed it out. I'm not obsessed. You are. It's cute. I hate this. Serious. Have you thought that maybe he feels the same? It wasn't a completely off-base idea. Remus always blushed a bit more whenever Sirius was acting all flirty, and he never seemed to mind whenever Sirius was occupying his space like he did when other people were. The more he thought about it, the more it all made sense. I can't think like that, but I can't get my hopes up. It's Remus. Yeah, that's my point. James could only hope that Sirius would actually take his advice and simply talk to Remus. Now, the two of them were going to be just awkward around each other, which wasn't going to translate well on stage. And their show was next day. He did not have very high expectations. Fucking ridiculous. Kidnapping me and then kicking me out of the room, Regulus mumbled, sliding off the bed. He only half remembered to slip on a pair of shoes and take the notebook with him. James seemed to be nosy, and he did not need him going through it. I'm going to stab the both of you in your sleep, he threatened before letting the door shut behind him. Ever since his earlier conversation with Marlene, Regulus couldn't stop thinking about it. He used to love music of all kinds, making it or listening to it. His favorite class had been music theory too. He was obsessed with learning how it worked, the way certain cadences sounded pleasing, and others made you want to go there, which chord progression worked best, and which were most common. All of it, really. He couldn't play any instruments, not with his left arm completely unusable. Well, he could probably play some very beginner piano, but that would be more frustrating than anything else. He could just sort of envision how things would sound in his head, and he had been using an app on his phone to check and see if it sounded good. And that was what he had been doing. He was writing music, not lyrics. He couldn't come up with a decent line if he tried. He wasn't sure if he was poetic enough to put raw emotion into words. No, that was more serious thing. Went down to the lobby, which was empty at this time of night. He had spent a little bit of time with Barty and Evan in their hotel room, but he was not interested in a repeat of the night before, so he called it a night much earlier than they did. He was sure that if he went down the hall to see them, then they would still be awake and partying, but he kind of liked the idea of being alone in such big space. It was quiet in a way he had yet to experience in Miami, and there was still the faint sound of people outside. The notebook was actually a random notepad that he had found in the drawer of the nightstand, and a pen he had taken from the front desk, but he was calling it his now. The more time he spent with the music, the more he regretted not helping Marlene. He didn't feel bad about it. At the time, he really had no interest in staying any longer than necessary, and he wasn't going to pretend he did. But now, well, he had nothing else to do. He didn't want to get a regular job. He had needed the creative expression ballet brought him, even if it was incredibly strict. That wasn't an option though, and music was a good fallback plan. He didn't know what Marlene was looking for exactly. Maybe she already had an idea of what she wanted. Or maybe this song was just a rough idea in her head, but he wanted to help. It would just be a couple more days on the tour, which wasn't a big deal at all in long run. It did mean more time on the bus, which sounded like an absolute nightmare if he was honest. The doors to the lobby opened, and a tall man who was probably in his mid 30s walked in, looking like he was slightly lost. His hair was bright red, and his eyes were bright blue. All of it looked just a little bit too fake. He noticed Regulus after a moment and came to sit down next to him. Regulus wanted to leave, especially after he had tried to start a conversation, introducing himself with a name that he didn't bother listening to. Regulus didn't respond once, didn't do anything except for mindlessly scroll through his phone and hope that the man took the hint. He didn't seem to, and instead placed a hand on Regulus's thigh, squeezing it tightly. That was when Regulus was done. It had only been about 7 minutes, but he didn't care at this point. He stood straight up, hating anyone touching him, especially without asking, and especially if it was a stranger. The man tried to grab for Regulus's hand, and instinctively he slapped him across the face, his hand stinging the moment he pulled it away. The man's head turned to the side, and Regulus managed to get a glimpse of how red his face was before he was getting away as quickly as he could. He had dealt with his fair share of creepy people, and he was used to them thinking they could use him for sexual favors. He hated it. That side of ballet where you had to sleep your way up to the top. Because of his name, he had never really had to. But he knew plenty of ballet dancers who were only there because they gave a good blowjob to the right man. As soon as the elevator's doors closed behind him, he just collapsed onto the ground, huddling himself into a small ball like he did when he was a kid, and just taking a moment for himself, rocking back and forth. He knew better than to respond like this in public. He had gotten good at acting like he was perfectly fine. Deep breath in, hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Repeat. Repeat. The elevator dinged much sooner than he had wanted it to. But he still stood up straight and tall, doing the breathing exercise he had been practicing since he was 16 and Sirius had moved out. He used to get really bad panic attacks that only Sirius could really help him through. He had learned how to manage them on his own by now, for the most part. The longer he was out of his comfort zone, the worse it got. He ran into James in the hallway, who tried to apologize for having him kicked out of the room, but promising it was important. Yeah, whatever, he said, not really listening and just trying to walk past him. Are you okay? James asked, his voice sounding just so sincere that it almost made Regulus tear up. He had better hold of his emotions than that, though, and he knew that James was only asking out of some obligation. Yes, James frowned. Reg, you're shaking, he said, reaching out and causing Regulus to move back so quickly that he almost fell over. He didn't know what to be more angry about, the nickname or yet another touch he didn't want. Oh, I'm sorry, he said, dropping his hand. Regulus shook his head, trying to get his hands to stay still. Just don't touch me, okay? He nodded immediately. Okay, yes, I'm sorry. And don't call me Reg. He nodded again. Got it? Regulus focused on the ground for a moment, focusing on the patterned carpet and trying to control his breathing. He was fine. Everything was fine. He needed air. Are you just going to stand there? Regulus asked once he had a better control of everything. Are you? He needed air. He didn't want to go downstairs. Want to go swimming? He asked. It was the first excuse he came up with to get James to go with him, which was embarrassing, if he was honest. James broke into a smile. What? Swimming. You can't swim, James pointed out. He shrugged. I can put my feet in the water. Silently, he was begging. Please, please don't make me go alone. Did something happen? James asked. Regulus shook his head, trying to stop himself from exploding in the middle of the hallway. No, forget about it. If he was lucky, the man would be gone. If he wasn't lucky, then he would just deal with it from there. Trying to get James to go with him had been a stupid idea. He was an adult. He didn't need a bodyguard or the presence of another human being. I want to come, James said, sounding so sure of himself. Do what you like, Regulus said, already walking back towards the elevator. He thought better of it, though, the idea of riding in the elevator sounding atrocious, and instead going towards the stairwell. They were on the sixth floor, so it was a lot of stairs, but he really didn't want to spend more time in the tiny metal box. Secretly, he was pleased that James followed him, and that he didn't mention anything about how they were taking the stairs this time. The man was no longer in the lobby, not from the quick glance that Regulus did before pushing the door open as roughly as he could. Miami was sticky and hot, but fresh air was fresh air. You stopped, James said when he almost walked right past where Regulus had stopped. He forgot he lured him out with promises of swimming, something that he had no intention of actually doing. I did. Regulus kept taking deep breaths, focusing on the night sky and counting the constellations he could see. It was something he did as a kid. Just look out his window and count. Within months, he was very familiar with the night sky and could name almost every star and constellation. James took out a cigarette, put it between his lips, and then seemed to think better of it, putting it back into the pack. He kept shuffling from foot to foot, waiting to see what Regulus was going to do. He wanted to tell him he could just leave, but he couldn't. He would never admit it, but being around James was helping him calm down more than he expected it would. It was easy for him to understand why Sirius had been so obsessed with James. He was the walking embodiment of all things good in the world, the opposite of everything they had grown up with. Being close to the sun was addicting after spending so much time being cold. Regulus mustered up every little bit of courage he had. Ready? He asked. James's eyes lit up. Regulus hates him. Yeah, yeah, I'm ready. The beach was emptier than it was in the middle of the day, although there were a handful of people still on the sand, mostly couples or groups of friends who were drunk. Regulus couldn't actually swim. He couldn't get the cast wet, but he slipped his shoes off in the same spot James did, close to the shore, and slowly walked deeper, letting the cold water lap over his feet until they were fully submerged. The water was freezing, and he was not getting used to it as quickly as he thought he would. James was shivering, but he shot Regulus a wide smile like he was enjoying the feeling. Regulus thought James might be a bit psychotic for it. Lovely, isn't it? James asked, taking a deeper step so that the water was halfway to his knees. The things he does to make James Potter happy. Ridiculous, really and truly. He could have been warm, standing in front of the hotel and enjoying the gentle breeze and the fresh air, but no. He had to step into the ocean in the middle of the night. Lovely? Regulus asked, taking the smallest step in with him. the water going just past his ankles. Yeah, it's lovely, James said with a big release of breath. Officially, James was insane. There was no way anybody could enjoy this. Maybe the water had been warmer earlier in the day when the sun had been out, but now it was miserable. Don't you think? He shook his head. You're mental. James held his hand out, an offering. It's warmer here, he said. Regulus was sure he was lying. There was no possible way the water got any warmer the deeper in you went. Regulus stared at the hand for a moment, but James was patient, and he didn't lower it in all the time it took for Regulus to take it. James's hand was warm. It was warm, and it was rough and calloused from playing the guitar, and the feeling of it against Regulus's own smooth hands was something that Regulus would be thinking about for years to come. The contrast, the juxtaposition, opposite, rough and smooth, cold and warm, steady and unstable. Warm, warm, warm. It warmed his entire body, even as he let James lightly pull him deeper into the water, soaking through both of their sweatpants. He wasn't paying attention to that. Regulus was the one who dropped his hands in the end, slightly overwhelmed at how soft of the touch it had been. It was different from the man from earlier. That touch had been aggressive. It was full of just taking and taking. That man had wanted to take. James wanted to give. Regulus wanted to let him. See? Warmer, right? Regulus's throat felt dry, but he managed a small smile, not sure why he cared so much about pleasing James, but deciding not to think about it too deeply. A bit,